Hi, everyone, and welcome back to Pop Rocks Radio. As always, I'm your host, Bijan. What follows is part two of my interview with Jeff Murphy of the legendary band Shoes. If you missed part one and want to check it out, you can find it right here. And if you like these videos and want to see more, please hit the like button and subscribe below. All right, on to the show.
We had a clause in our contract that said that if our music goes out of print on your label, then the licensing rights revert back to us, which they could rescind, but they never did. So for 30 years, we had it. We had the albums available on CD. We promoted them, and we did what we could to get them out there. We manufactured them on CD, which they had never done. Elektra never put them on CD. 30 years later, they come knocking on the door saying, we want these back. And we're like, what? Are you kidding me? Really? So, yeah. So unfortunately, they got the rights back.
Well, you talking about your contract with Elektra, I'm always, when I look at it, I know for present tense, you guys were co-producing with Mike Stone. Was it common at the time for a brand new band just signed to a major label to be allowed to co-produce their album? That seems kind of unusual.
Very much so. It was we were teacher's pet. The guy that signed us was the vice president in charge of promotion. He had never signed a band before, and he wanted to find a band. He wanted to get into A&R. He's the guy that broke the Cars, and that was hugely successful. Sold 6 million copies on the first album, and they were just releasing the second album when we were, I don't know if we were signed yet, but right about that same time. And it was creating a buzz, and the music industry, like so much entertainment, is very, what's the word? Trendy. And once there was a buzz about Shoes, everybody started, coming around. And they kept we had two lawyers, which were, thank God, very, very astute and knew what to go in and ask for. We got ownership, 100% ownership of our publishing, our songwriting, which is really where the money is. And we had already established a publishing company, so we got all those royalties. We also wanted to do 12-song albums instead of 10. I mean, because the industry norm is 10-song albums, because, well, the record labels say, we put as many songs on as you want. We're only going to pay you for 10. So songwriters don't want to waste their songs. They only do 10. Well, we had 3 writers, so we wanted to do at least 12. And that's the way the Beatles records were. There were always 12 or 15 songs. Depends on the English version or the American version. So we got full payment on 12 songs. And it was at full publishing rate. A lot of times they'll ask for a discount. Oh, we're doing all your songs. Can we get like 75%, instead of 100%? No, we got 100%. And then the clause of the relicensing, the fact the licensing would go to us. So they gave us a lot of things that were unheard of, and to entice us. And one of those things was, because we had put these records out on our own, we'd established a bit of a understanding of how records are made. So they felt, well, as long as you're working with someone else, they trusted us. The production credit on present tense was a little tumultuous, I remember, because Mike didn't want just to say produced by Mike Stone and Shoes. They wanted to say produced by Mike Stone for Mike Stone Enterprises Audio Limited Ltd, co-produced by Shoes. So, and we were a little like, well, and we were already in the studio working at that point. We didn't want it to get ugly.
Mm.
And we were doing this through lawyers, of course, but we eventually, acquiesced and said, okay, okay, that's fine. The second record with Richard Dashit. Now, Richard had just come off of doing Tusk,
Mhm.
and of course he had done Rumors.
Mm.
And he swung a lot of weight at that time, but he was the nicest guy. And he said, I don't want to get paid any more than you guys do. So he agreed to a minimal rate,
Mhm.
um, co-production. I mean, he was just cool about it all the way around.
Wow.
And there are some things that we didn't agree with him, but we went along thinking, well, he knows better than we do. And one of those times where you say, should have trusted. Like, he wasn't a fan of distorted guitars. He didn't like distorted guitars.
Okay.
So that limited how aggressive we would get with some things on Tongue Twister.
Mhm.
Also, what we decided to do, which was probably not the wisest thing, but because Present Tense had these big, lush background vocals, we
Mhm.
said, let's do the opposite on this record. Because we're still viewing this, because our deal with Elektra was for 10 albums, nine studio albums, and a greatest hits. So it was a 10-album deal. So we thought, there's time to take this road, and try different things. And so that record, we said, whoever sings lead, the other two guys will do the background vocals.
Mhm.
So you can hear the personalities, the different people. Well, and some people say it sounds like an elaborate demo. And yeah, I get it. I get that it's kind of stripped down. It's kind of clean sounding.
Mhm.
I remember at one time we were working on a bass guitar on one song. Don't remember the song. And we spent 14 hours working on this bass guitar on one song. And at this point, we had been in the studio for, every day for 14 or 15 hours. And we were just brain dead. And we you solo it, and every little squeak and grunt and groan, you'd go after it. And we said, let's take a day off. And we came back and we listened and we said, what was it we didn't like? What
Mhm.
bothered us? Never could find what it was that bothered us. And we realized that you get 90% there very quickly. The
Mhm.
last 10% you struggle over, but you never maybe ever get to 100% happiness. Um, but you have to move on. You have to do what you can do. When we finished the album, John, we'd come home, given it to the label, and John and I went to lunch, and he was really upset. And he said, I think we should call Elektra and tell them to stop the album, to not release it. I want to go in and I want to fix the vocal on Karen. I don't like it. And I said, man, what's wrong with it?
Mhm.
And he said, I just don't like what I did. It just did a bad job. And I said, look, it's going to be disaster if you do that. If you stop them, it's going it's going to instill insecurity and lack of confidence
Mhm.
in this record or in this album, in this song. Um, but it took a lot of persuading to just say, leave it. And then when it came time to do the first single, it was going to be a picture sleeve of, I got to remember what it was going to be. She Satisfies and Your Imagination,
Okay. Great
with this
songs. Yeah.
full color picture sleeve. Nice, looked like the album cover had that. And one of the promo guys from Elektra happened to be in an elevator with this radio programmer, Cal Rudman. And Cal Rudman said, hey, that song Karen off of Tongue Twister, top 40 hit. That's a top 40 hit. So Elektra panicked because it's like, that's not the single. So they call us up and they said, look, we're gonna make a different single. We're gonna destroy that one. We're gonna do another one. Karen on the A side, and She Satisfies as the other A side. It's a double A side. They can play this for top 40. They can play this for AOR. No picture sleeve though. I'm like, yeah, but you've already got these. Well, we'll crush them. No, no, don't do that. So we're on the phone. So we said, we'll take everything. We'll give to the fan club, right? Whatever. And we got 5,000 empty picture sleeves. We never got the records. We got 5,000 empty pictures. And they went with Karen, the song that John was insecure. Karen as the A side, and She Satisfies as the AOR A side. So you just never know. I mean, you
Oh,
just don't.
wow. Do you still have those sleeves?
Yes,
You do.
yes, yeah, yeah. We still do.
Oh,
And
wow.
we had a lot of promo stuff that Elektra had. Although we've waned through quite a bit of it. Mobiles, they had these hanging mobiles, which were cool. But through the years, yeah, you get tired of moving things around,
Yeah.
from one storage area to another.
No, that album, I love that album. And I remember reading, I think it was Jordan Oakes, publisher of Yellow Pills. He
Yeah.
was saying if he was stranded on a desert island, the three records he would take with him were Big Star's number one record, Bad Fingers, Wish You Were Here, and Tongue Twister by Shoes.
Wow.
Yeah.
Wow, that's high praise.
Yeah, definitely.
Because I mean that is, which was like you mentioned, this Cherry Red compilation, Looking for the Magic. I mean, when I found out about it by accident, because a friend of mine, I've done some, like I say, I like to do things with other people's records, and a friend of mine was a English professor at a college down in western suburbs of Chicago, and he would do a Beatle day, for English literature, and it would be about Beatles and stuff and music, and so he'd ask me to come in and talk, which I had fun doing, and we developed a friendship. And he had a band back in the early '70s called Athenor,
Hmm.
or Athenor, and he had done a independent single back then, and some recording, and recently he's been doing some stuff, and he just did a single last year, and I sang harmony vocals with him on that. But anyhow, he called me up and he said, "Hey, we're going to be on the same record." And I said, "Really? What's that?" And he told me about it. I said, "I haven't heard anything about this." And um, so I sent an email to the label, and they got back. They said, "Oh yeah, sorry, yeah, we're gonna use." Originally, they were going to use Running Start
Hmm.
from Black Vinyl.
Hmm.
I thought, wow, that's an odd choice. And then they got back to me a couple weeks later. They said, "No, we've decided to go with Boys Don't Lie." And I said, I'm really happy to be involved on a record that has basically our idols, Big Star, and Badfinger, and Todd Rundgren, and all these guys that we idolize. To be included in that same company is fantastic. But unfortunately, they're using a song that was recorded in my living room on a 4-track machine 45 years ago. And we're comparing that to the gods, next to Badfinger or whoever professionally recorded. Um, but just to be included, I guess, is the important thing.
Yeah.
Uh, but yeah, it's not maybe not the best representation, but it's a representation, so that's good.
Oh, I think the reputation of that album just continues to grow over the years. So I know we're always hardest on ourselves, and as a producer, I'm sure you're hearing all these things that nobody else is, because I listen to that song and I listen to that whole album. I think this is, this could have been recorded yesterday.
It's funny because people tell me that, and I've heard that quite a bit. The odd thing is, we couldn't afford speakers, so it was completely recorded with headphones, and it makes more sense if you listen in the headphones. Um, because you can hear things in place. But really our ability to, because you only had four channels to deal with, if you wanted more than four instruments, which of course we wanted, what you would have to do is well, we called it ping pong or bouncing. And you would have to, record three channels worth of stuff and then mix them together onto this fourth track. Now there's three things over here, and you got three open channels.
Mm-hmm.
So now you can kind of do the same thing up here and bounce things around. We discovered that you can't really bounce bass. Bass guitar does not hold up well, at least
Mm-hmm.
not on that machine. It gets really mushy and loses its distinction. So, and bass is usually in the center. So thinking of it in a stereo arc, this rainbow of music, left side, right side, center, you know, 10 o'clock, 2 o'clock, you have these areas that you're trying to place things, but with four channels. So main vocals are going to be in the center.
Mm-hmm.
So we would try to put that on its own track. And when the singer wasn't singing, that track's available. Now we can stick a lead guitar there. But the lead guitar has to be done when the vocal comes back in. So this all had to be charted out. So we would plan it all on paper and say, okay, we have to do this, record this now, and mix these to, and well, this channel is going to end up on the left side. So it has to be, you know, tambourine and rhythm guitar and one side of the background vocals. And that's going to be on the left side. So, you would plan things out that way
Mm-hmm.
to figure out where it was going to be. And then when it came time to mix, we started mixing things together, like on the bass channel, bass guitar. We thought, well, if we put something that's a high frequency, like a tambourine or maracas or hand claps or some percussive instrument, if you guess wrong at the relative level between the two, when you cement them together and mix them together onto one channel, you still have a little bit of control because you can add some high frequency, some treble, and that
Mm-hmm.
will make the tambourine a little louder without
Mm-hmm.
affecting the bass guitar that's on the same channel. Or vice versa. If the tambourine's too loud, you can turn down the treble. It doesn't really affect the bass guitar that much. So that was another way to kind of get the most out of the four channels. It was a challenge for sure.
Were you pretty much in charge of taking care of all these things? I know you were doing most of the engineering, if not all the engineering for all your sessions. Um, I mean, in terms of figuring all that stuff out, charting that stuff out, doing, you know, working the arrangements and things, was that something you guys shared amongst the three of you?
I mean, I owned the tape machine and most of the gear at that point because those guys were still going to college. They were still
Hmm.
putting themselves through school. I was just working a job. So I was taking out loans to buy things, and so yeah, I pretty much put together the sequence and the chart. But then once we, once I had it down on paper, um, John doesn't John doesn't really focus on the technical aspect of making music. He's an artist. I mean, in the truest sense of the word, he thinks differently. So Gary and I are very technologically oriented. Although Gary also graphic too. But so we were both learning at the same time. I did virtually all the recording, all the engineering through black vinyl because it was at my house. It was in my kitchen. It was there. Um, in early 78, we rented our first rehearsal space where the band, and I moved the tape recorder there. And then we bought an 8-channel tape machine because we had a little bit of success. And that's when Gary started getting involved.
Mm.
We didn't really have to do any ping ponging. Now we could figure out how to do it in 8 channels. We could maybe record the drums on 6 tracks and then bounce it down to 2,
Mm.
and then salt in the other channels. So that's when Gary got more involved in the engineering and stuff. And, you know, like I said, we we both have an interest in it. We both love to do it. So um, we would go off and do other things. Gary worked with Spooner
Mhm.
um, on that album, Every Corner Dance, and which ironically, how that exploded for Butch and Doug, how they went on to Garbage, and Butch is producing. Um, it's funny how you touch base with people. You make these connections with people, and sometimes these really great, wonderful things happen, and you get to witness it. But we were a lucky studio. We always seemed to have clients, um, and yeah, we did well with it. I mean, we had some good talent come through,
Right.
and had a chance to really work with some great people. A number of people went on to major label deals actually too, which is cool.
Oh, definitely. Yeah, I'm a big fan of Material Issue. I know you did their first two albums, right?
Yep, yeah,
Yeah,
did the
which I
first two of those. The guys in Local H, I don't know if you're familiar with them. They well, Scott, the guitar player, he worked at the Subway sandwich shop around the corner from the studio, and bands would come in and be working, and then they'd go over there and get a sandwich, and he could tell they were in a band, and he'd say, "What are you guys doing in town?" And they'd say, "Oh, we're working over with a chef over at the studio." And he'd say, "Oh man, I want to get over there." So he eventually, got his band together and started coming in, and we did. I did the demos for actually for their first three albums. I did the stuff that the tapes that got them signed eventually to Chris
Mhm.
Blackwell. Signed him to Island, and then an offshoot of Material Issue was the when I first started working with Jim, which would have been, I think, 85, when I started
Wow.
working with Jim. He had a different bass player and a drummer.
Mhm.
But Jim was a very headstrong person, and he wanted to. It was funny. I felt bad for the guys in the band because, he would, on one hand, he would say, I have to do all this on my own. I have to write everything. Why don't you guys write some songs too? Well, but yeah, he wasn't really willing to accept, or maybe their standards, weren't as high or whatever. But so Jim was always writing. Jim wrote everything, and so I think the other that original lineup. Wanted to have more say in the direction of the band. So they split off, and the bass player from that band started a band that went through a couple of different incarnations, and eventually they changed their name to the Lupins, and they got signed, I think, to CBS it was.
Okay.
And so that was a kind of an interesting offshoot that came from that as well. So you just never know. I mean, like we say, in this industry, you can never piss anybody off because you never know when they're going to go on to become someone successful or your boss or so
Right, right.
and so you have to be really careful. I've told this story before, but when we were signed to Elektra, in kind of the waning days of the label was in kind of disarray, Elektra, and they were trying all kinds of things, and they said to us, "Hey, we've got this kid that's from kind of from your neck of the woods. He's from Illinois,
Mhm.
and he's 19, but he seems to have really good ears, and he works in the mailroom in Bensonville, Illinois, for the WIA distributor. And so, you mind if he kind of hangs around with you when you go out and do some press junkets?" And we said, "Sure." So, that's why we were out in LA at the time, was we were just doing promo for one of the albums. I don't remember which one. I think it was the third one actually.
Mhm.
And eventually we came home, and the label people were getting fired left and right. We could tell there was really an upheaval going on.
Mhm.
And this 19-year-old kid just kept clicking up the ladder through attrition. Everyone else was
Mhm.
getting fired, so there's no one else to do the job. And he eventually became head of A&R for Elektra. And the
Wow.
first band he signed was Motley Crue. Well, that sealed his credentials.
Yeah.
And then, as Elektra was really having problems, they ended up closing the West Coast office completely, firing everybody. I mean,
Mm.
in closing it. And he jumped over to um, Tommy jumped over to Geffen, and he signed Edie Brickell, and then he signed Guns N' Roses,
Oh,
and
wow.
suddenly Tommy was this whiz kid, you know. So you just never know. And one more caveat on that story was we did a couple of shows in 2014, and we'd come off stage. And you do the kind of meet and greet thing, and you're shaking hands, and people are doing pictures and stuff. And this guy comes up and he says, "Hey, can I do a picture with you guys?" And we said, "Sure." So he hands a camera over, and we're standing and smiling. And I look at the guy and I said, "You look familiar." And he takes the camera down, and it's Tommy. And I said, "What are you doing? What are you doing here?" And he said, "I came to see you." He said, "I've been following you guys for the last 40 years." I said,
Yeah, wow.
"Oh man, it was really cool."
That's
So
awesome.
like I said, you just never know where those ties are going to lead. So you
Right.
got to be nice to everybody.
Ignition would have been recorded with your home studios. Is that correct?
Yeah, I would do bits. Um, for instance, I decided I love collaborations.
Mm.
I love it because that way you're all in, you're all committed and you're all, well, when you come in with a song, whoever comes in with a song sort of has ultimate say. If John comes in with a song, it's his song. You try to come up with something he likes. He has the ultimate thumbs up or thumbs down authority. But when you do something as a collaboration, everyone is fitting in, and
Mm.
contributing to the best interest of the song. It's a different thing. So, and I just enjoy that team effort. So I started a song called "Say It Like You Mean It,"
Mm.
and I had the chorus. So I recorded just that. That's all I had. But I thought so. I went to give it to Gary. Um, but so just the guitar. But I needed it wouldn't be right to just start cold. So I did play this little riff into it. Just, well, Gary liked the riff. So he took that and duplicated it and made that the verse. And so then we had the verse and the chorus. And we said to John, "Okay, you write the middle eight."
Mm.
And we bashed some chords together, and John wrote the lyrics and the melody for the middle eight, and this song kind of happened that way. I mean, that's but I record some of the stuff here,
Mm.
and then the way digital is, I just would take that over to Gary's. We'd fly it into his system, then he would add to it. The first song on that album was a friend of mine had died from this really awful disease called CJD, which is
Mm.
for lack of a better term, they call it the human version of mad cow disease.
Oh boy.
And it's this unexplained uh, deterioration of the brain,
Mm.
basically, and died very quickly. And just went, it was crazy. And so I wrote this little lament, and I played it for John, and he said, "You should put drums to it." So I put these kind of this slow marching thing to it, and then gave it to Gary. And they called me up one day and they said, "Hey, can you come over?" I said, "Well, Lori and I've got tickets to go see this show today." So I said, "Is tomorrow all right? I'll come over tomorrow." So I went over and they had taken the song out of round
Mhm.
and again changed it and really kicked it in the ass, really gave it, which my wife was really upset with because my wife she was really good friends, childhood friends with this guy that had died.
Mhm.
And so to her, the initial lament was very personal and powerful to her. The fact that it had changed really upset her. I said, "This is what being in a band is. is different perspectives, and different influences. That's why you're in a band.
Mhm.
And because we all three of us learned a long time ago that we can do things completely on our own. We don't need to have other people involved. We just choose to.
Mhm.
Um, and we pull strength from each other. We're a very odd combination of insecurity and confidence. We're confident in what we like, but really insecure in being accepted and being considered a musician because of the way we work and because of our lack of knowledge. Um, we know what we like, and that's what we shoot for. When we find something, we go, "Oh wow, yeah, that's cool. What's that? What is that?" And there's just no greater thrill. I saw something recently. I can't remember where it was, and a musician was saying, "There's no greater thrill than to sit back and listen to a completed song that you come up with.
Mhm.
You just can't express it. It's you've created something from nothing. Not like a painting where you use a brush and paint in the canvas to create music. If you're successful, if you've done your job right, I've never touched you or met you or been in the same room or given you anything, but I've stuck something in your brain that's always there. That's an incredible thing when you think about it. There's not many things in life that are like that. So when you do that and it gets you excited about it, then you're successful. And that's the way we always judge our records. If we like it, it would be nice to be commercially successful, of course,
Mhm.
but we have to be happy with it. And of course, as an artist, you're always looking back and go, "Oh man, why didn't I do this? Why didn't I do that? I can hear it now, but I couldn't hear it then." So, but it's still a thrill. We still love it as much as we ever did.
I have so many other questions, but what you said was so cool. I almost want to leave it right there.
Sure.
So I do have one question or well, two questions I'm gonna squeak in here. I'm just conscious of the time. I don't want to take you too long. But first question is, can you confirm you guys opened for Kiss?
Yes, we did.
You
Yeah.
did.
That was it was on New Year's Eve at the Rockford Metro Center. I want to say that was in 1982, 83. I think it was 82. Uh, yeah, I think it was 1982, turning into 1983.
Okay.
And we had been out playing, and we had just lost the deal with Elektra.
Hmm.
And Gene had been aware of us and a Shoes fan. He's very musically astute. I mean, and the Beatles are his favorite band, which, I mean, like many of us. And they tried to buy our publishing at one point back in the late 70s, which we didn't obviously want to sell. But yeah, so we did that show and we expected to get killed. We thought, oh my God, this is going to be murder. But it was really good. It was
Mhm.
really good. And they were incredibly professional, and they were like 4 hours behind schedule because they backed into a water main coming into the building with one of the semis, and it screwed up their schedule. They still gave us a complete sound check, and they said, you use any part of the stage you want, just don't go out on the runways. And we said, we don't want to go out on the runways. We're staying on the stage. And yeah, but that's true. Um, Ironically, 10 years later, well, not even, um, 5 years later, 1988, we were just starting what would be Stolen Wishes. And we got a call from Gene, and he said, "I'm starting a new label, and it's being distributed by BMG, and I'm only going to sign 4 acts. And so each one has to be multi-platinum. And let's do this. You guys
Wow.
remain autonomous. You record this stuff. You give it to me. I give it to BMG, and we'll get him out there, which sounded very attractive. So we would call. I mean, he would call every night. He was on the Monsters of Rock tour, and he would call after the show at night. He'd call, okay, and he'd ask us questions, and we were talking back and forth. And then he said, "Okay, I'm ready to cross the T's and dot the I's. Let's do
Mm-hmm.
this." So he booked some flights for us to New York on the KISS travel agency, and we went to New
Kiss travel.
York, and we walk into this meeting, and Gene comes out, and he says, "I'm sorry, I should have canceled the meeting." And I thought, oh, you know, somebody's not available or whatever. He said, "Well, you're already here, so let's do this." Well, I thought, well, you flew us in, it was your choice. So we go in, and he said, "My business partner just doesn't hear it." We're like, "What?" We're months into this discussion. You fly us in, and now your business partner doesn't hear it.
Mm-hmm.
And so it was really a bad meeting. Um, it was always very respectful to us. Um, but it really got down to his business partner, who was really an old advertising guy. He wasn't a music guy. Um, and he's like, you guys need to write hits." We're like, well, what do you mean, right? I said, strong chorus and a good melody. No, that's not it. What do you mean? Points to Billboard. That's a hit. I said, no, that's hindsight. That's choosing after the fact. And so it got down to that kind of stuff. And it
Yeah.
was like, read me some lyrics. We had a song called Love is Like a Bullet.
Mhm.
And he said, it's a bad title. And I'll tell you why. Because the only people who can relate to a song like Love is Like a Bullet is people that have been shot.
What?
Yeah. So we're like, no, no. I said, what about Message in a Bottle by the Police? Only to people on desert islands? And he said, they got the sting.
The Sting.
All right. So then, we come out of the meeting, and Gene says, look, we can still do this. Just write me some hits. I'll be in touch. So we went back and forth for another couple months, and we just eventually said, to hell with it, and kept going with put the album out on our own. And then one day the phone rang, and it was his office calling, requesting a copy of the album.
Mhm.
And so we sent it, and then he called one day, and he said, "I want to talk about your album." It's okay. And at this point, we knew that Rolling Stone had given it a 4-star review. The review hadn't come out yet, but we knew it was coming out. And man, he started bashing the record. I don't get it. You're not going to get 15-year-olds excited about this. We said, we're not into 15-year-olds. That's not what we're trying to do.
Mhm.
You know, we said more sort of the alternative, more college age, college radio, which at that time hadn't really been a thing. But it was, RE bands like REM were starting to make that a thing.
Mhm.
And yeah, it just was really a bad conversation. He was just like, I don't get it. And I said, well, Rolling Stone is coming out with a 4-star review, so it is what it is. And that was the last conversation we had with him.
Oh, wow.
Yeah, yeah. So that, yes, to answer your question, yes, we did play with Kiss.
Thank you. You mentioned alternative bands. It reminds me of um, something Eric Carmen said, where he was talking about Raspberries, and he said that he always considered Raspberries to be an alternative band because they were um, an alternative to what was going on with popular radio at the time, progressive rock and things like that. Um, and I mean, did you guys look at yourself as an alternative band then?
Yeah, I mean, again, we didn't try to classify ourselves, but
Right.
we saw a need there was a void. Music had changed, and just because the current musical trends had shifted didn't mean that I stopped loving that Beatlesque melodic rock stuff.
Mhm.
But there wasn't a source for it anymore. Who's doing that?
Mhm.
You could find them, the big stars and the Emmett Rhodes and people like that were still doing it. But we wanted to fill that void. We wanted to do that. We thought if the Beatles are still and probably I mean even today the Beatles are probably one of the most popular bands, or at least well known, well loved. What's wrong with having something that's in that similar genre without
Mhm.
being without aping it, without copying it, without making it your own, but you know, and yet it was like the kiss of death. If you were considered Beatlesque, it's a challenge. People are going to listen to it and say, "Hey, you don't sound like the Beatles." That's not what you're. There was. It's because they didn't have another term for it. Now they have power pop, but now that became, like I said, cheesy Beatle imitator bands or skinny tie bands or whatever you want to call it. We were like, no. I mean, even with us, we were called Shoes. Shoes. John and Gary started it, the two of them. Shoes. John wanted something simple, unassuming, and he liked it graphically because it was equal on the ends and it had an O in the middle. Graphically, it was a nice word. So Shoes was the name. Of course, then that clip of the Beatles saying they could have been called Shoes was a great stroke of luck. We had no idea that existed, but that aired right at the time we were talking to Elektra. So when the vice president saw that clip, he was like, "Oh my God, this is God talking to me. This is a sign from heaven." Um, so we had a couple of those where luck or fate or whatever you want to call it. Um, the plane crash was another one. The
It's a
the
crazy story.
that was a crazy thing. We were going out to L.A. on the Memorial Day weekend in 1979. We were going to do a photo session for the album cover, and we were going to leave on a Friday afternoon out of O'Hare. We're packed and ready to go. Thursday, man, we're living out of our suitcases because tomorrow we're getting up and going. And Thursday afternoon, they call up and they say, "Look, it's Memorial Day weekend. No one's going to be in the office until Tuesday." We were like, "Yeah, we know." And we thought, extra 3 days paid vacation in LA. They said, "Well, we're going to move your flight. We're going to shift you to another flight till later because that way there." And so we were pissed. I mean, we weren't happy. And the plane went down, crashed, and killed everybody on board. So it was a strange God, divine intervention, whatever you want to call it. Um, and again, within the label, they were going, "Oh my God, you guys are going to be so big. This is such a sign." It's like, well, yeah, right. If I had a nickel for every time somebody said that to us.
One last question. Um, you've kind of talked about this, but to put a bow on it, you've been doing this now for 50 years. Are you still having fun?
Oh man, yes,
Yeah.
yeah, absolutely. I mean, I miss the analog. I mean, I got a TAC 3340. You can't see it, but I'm sitting right here.
Really?
Just to see it, just to be in the room with it. I love it. Um, I love the electromechanical aspect of recording. So I learned electronics because I had to fix things at the studio. If something went down, it was like, uh-oh, the headphone amplifier stopped working, or one channel on the tape machine, is messed up. So I kind of learned electronics along the way. And I still love making music. I still love, I mean, and John and Gary are the same way. Whenever we get together, we always, I mean, we don't get to the ugly side of things, which is talking about how to release it. That's really become the worst thing for us now. If we had an avenue to get things out that made sense, then we would be much more active. But as it is, we're just kind of doing these things that we don't have to deal with that in. Because now, I mean, after 50 years of doing it, number one, it's incredibly expensive to mail things, hard
Mm,
copies, especially if you're talking vinyl, which is the still the only thing that's really exciting. I mean, yeah, you put
I agree.
CDs out, but vinyl is exciting when you get something on vinyl. But it's, you have problems with storage and shipping, and it's heavy, it's expensive. There's all kinds of downside to it.
Mm.
If we're doing it, if there's a company that's what they do, then that's a different thing. But we just haven't really pursued it because we know how difficult. I mean, we were in distribution back in the mid '90s for CDs and stuff, and we got bit hard. We were doing really well, and then suddenly the distribution started to dry up. And I think I've said before, a semi pulled up to the studio and had $90,000 worth of CDs on it.
Wow.
Here, we can't pay you, but here's this product that we had ordered over the last year that, from all these distributors. Or worse yet, was distributors would go under and declare bankruptcy, and their assets would be sold off for pennies on the dollar to cover their debt. And their assets were our records that they had never paid for. So what the new company would do that bought those, they would return them to us for full price. So now we got to pay to get back the record that we were never paid for in the first place.
Oh my gosh.
So it really led to a disaster financially. And that's when we said we pulled plug on doing the label with other people and other things, and just going back to just doing shoe stuff.
Yeah.
Um, but it's having that vehicle to release. It's just a much more difficult thing. Where do you sell it now? I mean, it used to be stores like Target and Best Buy, and and then you had mom and pop record stores, which were
Yeah.
those were the fun ones, the independents. God, we had a store that we used to go to when we were um, uh, years ago. It was called Strawberry Fields, and we
Mm.
used to love to go in there and just talk to the guy behind the counter. We had a relationship where he'd say, "Oh man, check out this new Ziggy Stardust. This is really something." Um, you don't have that anymore. Now you go into a store and it's somebody saying, "Record? What? Oh, yeah, check back there." So it's a different thing, and that's the frustrating end of it. So we don't get into that, but we talk about having bits of songs that we're kicking around and working on. Maybe someday they'll float to the surface.
Oh, I hope so. I hope so. I'm sure a lot of people hope so too. So, and in terms of, you know, just to let you know too, when you guys do put out a new shoes album, please consider my channel your channel, and
Oh, thank you.
love to talk about it as much as possible.
Oh, that's great. Thank you.
Yeah. I mean, I don't have a million subscribers, but every single one of my subscribers is a shoes fan. So I can tell you that.
Oh, that's great. Well,
Yeah.
and like I said, I mean, we don't discriminate against how, I don't want to say how important or how big or how well known. If it's music related, and we get a chance to talk music, I mean, the reason that John and Gary aren't involved with this Zoom is because Gary's company, which we all work at now. I mean, as we work for this company,
Mhm.
this is the absolute busiest, craziest time for him. And so, I mean, I haven't seen him yet in 2024, where
Oh,
typically I would see him every day, because he's been so consumed with what he does. And John is involved in the graphics of this catalog that gets put together.
mhm.
And again, it's crunch time because everything goes to the printer. I think today might be the last day. So they work for months and months on this catalog, and then it has to be to the printer by the end of the first week in January.
Mhm.
So unfortunately, this is just really a difficult time for them. And so I thought, well, hey, I get to talk music. I'll talk music.
Oh, I really appreciate you coming and spending the time with me. It's been such a pleasure to talk with you.
Oh, myself included, I really enjoyed it. Like I said, I excuse the sound of my voice and the hoarseness and everything, but it's been fun just talking music. I love it.
Oh, it's great. Thank you. I hope we didn't make your voice worse, but
No, no. Well, the thing is, once you get to a point with a cold or whatever this is, I feel like if you don't use something, if you're, sleeping 12 hours a day or whatever, your body aches. You got to get up and use it. You got to, move around and use your voice. Otherwise, it's really difficult to get past it.
yeah, yeah. So, well, I quick want to say too, before we wrap up, I just want to give a really special thanks to Ed Turner, without whom none of this would have happened. Um,
Thanks, Ed. Thanks, Ed.
Yeah, definitely. Thanks, Ed. Ed has produced, for those of you who don't know, Ed has produced an excellent documentary called Ticket to Write about the golden age of rock journalism. If you haven't seen it, do yourself a favor. I'm going to put a link in the description so you guys can watch that. I think it's great. Um, Jeff, thank you so much.
Oh, thank you. I really appreciate it. Anytime.
Oh, anytime. I'm going to take you up on that.
Please do.
So please, let's keep in touch. I'm wishing you the best in 2024.
You as well.
Thanks, Jeff. All
Thank you.
right. Take
Take
care.
care. Bye-bye.
Bye.